Thank you, Acting President. I will be brief. School safety is an issue that concerns families, students and staff right across the state. The 2020 Australian Principal Occupational Health, Safety and Wellbeing Survey highlighted that violence, bullying and threats of violence is a significant issue for schools, teachers and principals. Violence and threats of violence are unacceptable, and I'm sure that we'd all agree that teachers deserve to have a safe workspace. The problem, as usual, is that this legislation goes too far. Violence and threats of violence are crimes. These crimes are clearly outlined, along with their penalties, in the Crimes Act 1958. If there is reluctance to prosecute parents of students under their care, which may well be understandable, there is already the option to apply for an intervention order. It isn't clear why these existing systems are not considered adequate. Perhaps there is a good reason, but it isn't clear why allowing principals to ban a person from a school or requiring them to attend some kind of program is a better solution for dealing with serious crimes such as assault or threats to violence or even threats to kill someone than the existing justice system. The Education Department obviously recognises the difficulties in managing this problem, as a ministerial task force was established a couple of years back to look at it. They were a pretty good panel informing the work, and they made some very good and pragmatic recommendations. Unfortunately, there was not a parent representative on the panel that might have helped balance some of the recommendations. Among the recommendations was one for the Minister to consider the benefits and risks of legislative change that enables harsher penalties for threatening or aggressive conduct towards school staff. It didn't exactly say go ahead and draft the legislation. Perhaps at the committee stage of debate might clarify what risks were identified when drafting this legislation. Is there a risk that these orders banning parents from attending school could escalate rather than reduce violence and aggression? What might be the impact on children? How does it ensure that this behaviour is, as Mr Back stated, is actually serious behaviour? There are many situations where a parent might communicate with another parent or other members of the community about a teacher or a staff member at a school. This could be uncomfortable for teachers. It could be stressful. But there are circumstances where a teacher might be a terrible teacher, and it's perfectly right for them to be criticised. Parents Victoria have raised a number of very reasonable concerns with this legislation, including some criticism of inadequate consultation. It's not hard to think up a situation where the legislation would be able to be used against parents. Imagine groups of parents begin to talk to each other about concerns about what is happening, about a school, its principal or its performance, which are often linked. Has engaged in and is likely to engage in vexatious communication with or regarding a staff member at the relevant school. They will be far too easily be considered to be breaching these rules, and any number of bad teachers or principals with an agenda could leap on the opportunity to shut them up. You need look no further than the upheaval over the Shepparton school amalgamation to see a situation where these powers would have been seized upon to shut up the opposition, probably with the full connivance of the department and the minister. I have no faith that these powers will not be abused to shut up the opposition. It will probably happen on a regular basis. This will be used to silence disruptive members of school communities. This will sweep concerned school parents and community members under the carpet, where they will lie along with all the other poor performance indicators that are gathering dust down there. At some point, somebody's going to notice the bulge. Mr Back's comments that he had received reassurances from the government that they absolutely, cross their hearts, wouldn't abuse these powers. It could be worth mentioning that over the last year or so, my colleague David received reassurances from the Premier that all our freedoms will be returned. We're still waiting. I'm not sure I trust all the government's reassurances. We received reassurances that the Open Courts Bill would provide better access for survivors of sexual assault to be able to speak out, and it achieved the opposite. Ms Maxwell was assured by the government that transport legislation that passed last year would enable licence cancellation for hidden-run offences. But she's here today proposing amendments to resolve that, because it did not. The 2019-20 Department of Education annual report highlights the activities of the Independent Office for School Dispute Resolution. Presumably this independent body would deal with these kinds of matters, but the report highlights that they're only dealing with a handful of complaints. Is it possible that the current systems are being underutilised? When we talk about appropriate and proportionate powers for dealing with the problem, it's worth considering the dystopia that health bureaucrats have forced on us for the last 15 months. There's a requirement in this bill that orders must be the least restrictive means available. I think we've all heard those words before. Apparently, the least restrictive restrictions required to manage a small coronavirus outbreak in Melbourne requires shutting down businesses in Mildura and requiring people in communities that have no COVID cases during the whole pandemic to remain within 5 kilometres of their home. Will principals and department secretaries manage this balance better than our health bureaucrats? Well, perhaps. That wouldn't be hard. But the words themselves provide very little comfort. This bill is counterintuitive to the Child Wellbeing and Safety, Child Safe Standards Compliance and Enforcement Amendment Bill. You want to keep disengaged parents and children at an arm's length, still connected to the school. Don't give untrained educators the responsibility of the courts to impose these orders on parents and school community members. It seems that this is another example of making things double illegal and going beyond what is necessary and useful to resolve the problem. As I stated earlier today, perhaps government members could tattoo unintended consequences on their hands as a reminder. And I think this legislation has significant risk of unintended consequences. The Liberal Democrats will not support this bill.
Thank you. If there's no